Okay, we are going live. Give us 10 seconds to process that.
And it's a wrap from free.
Sorry about that. Okay, just one more second. Okay, sorry, that was some kind of advertisement on our own channel. I forgot we had enabled those, so my apologies. So thanks everybody for joining us. I think we are actually gonna get started now. If you're just joining us, this is a webinar presentation, the 5th Canadian Association for Equality webinar event. This is an online lecture series aimed at exploring gender and men's issues with thinkers and scholars from the international community. Today, the topic is the seduction community, more than meets the eye. And I'm really pleased to be joined by Jacky Zhou for today's presentation. It's going to be about 40 to 45 minutes, and then we're going to have a discussion and Q&A. So if you've got questions, please hold them for now. We will invite you to use either the chat function or you can actually come in. We can give you speaking privileges and you can speak to Jacky directly to ask your question. Just want to say a few quick words about Canadian Association for Equality and our programs at the Centers for Men and Families. Just by way of update, our men's centers are now in phase 1 of their COVID reopening plan. And that basically means that we're now doing limited one-on-one counseling and other one-on-one programs. Our group services are remaining online. And in fact, they've been so popular online that we think we're going to keep them going in the online forum probably for a good long time, maybe forever. But the one-on-one programs are going to are now resuming, in fact, at all of our offices across Canada. And we do have a web page, just pulling it up now, and that is menandfamilies.org/COVID, if you're interested in the details of our COVID phase 1 response. I'll also draw your attention to another web page, menandfamilies.org/online programs, and those are all of the various online groups that have been running, most of them now since the early days of the pandemic. Some of them are new. We've rolled them out over the last month or so. We've got our Fathering After Separation program, our legal clinic, now being offered in both, actually in Alberta, BC, and Ontario, because much of the legal clinic is focused on family law, which is provincial and jurisdiction. So depending on which province you're in, at least if you're in one of those 3, there is a separate clinic for you. We've got our long-running men's peer support group, our domestic abuse support group, which now actually has 3 different evening programs, again, divided somewhat by geography and also by sort of where you are in the healing process. And that's for male survivors of domestic abuse and trauma, and a number of other more localized programs as well as some local webinars. So again, that's menandfamilies.org/online programs. Really do want to encourage those of you who would benefit from the support and the services. Don't hesitate to get more information and then to register on our website or by reaching out to us. I'm really pleased to be joined today by a special guest, Paul Dowell, who is the co-branch director for our emerging branch, now online center in Vancouver. With interest over British Columbia. We're pulling in clients from really across the province, but I've asked Paul to join us today just by way of sharing a quick update on our plans there on the West Coast. Paul, can I leave that off to you then?
Certainly. Thank you very much, Justin. Very happy to be here and hear what Jacky has to tell us about this interesting subject, and to tell you a little bit about our new center that we're planning on opening in early 2021 in the Vancouver area. The Canadian Centre of Men and Families doesn't have any representation in BC currently, and there's a large gap here in services, as there has been in other provinces. We want to help men, boys, and families to live a healthy life. Our vision is healthy boys, healthy men, healthy families, create healthy communities. We have been working hard over the months since we started to get together as a volunteer group. We have been raising funds in order to establish a physical presence here. But as Justin has mentioned, we have online services that have been happening for months now. We have a men's support group. We have a domestic abuse support group, and sorry, that's going to be starting soon. I apologize. And we have a legal clinic starting very soon as well, to help men and their families to get through whatever challenging times they have. We embrace these types of informational sessions to enlighten men and people of the community about the challenges that men and boys face. Our mission here in Vancouver, I'm going to read it here. The Canadian Centre for Men and Families is Vancouver's hub for boys, men, fathers, and families. We proactively foster healthy boys and men by filling critical gaps in men's services that reduce male suicide, empower fathers undergoing separation and divorce, and help boys and men heal from trauma. We support, empower, and advocate for men before, during, and after a crisis in a safe, open, inclusive, and supportive environment. Now, this crisis can be anything. I was talking to a retired gentleman who has a friend who is suffering depression because he quit his job, retired, pardon me, and he didn't know what to do with himself. Other men who have experienced work-safe accidents and have been having to work through their recuperation to be able to get back to work, suffered mentally and physically. And we're here to help all men and all families get through these trying times. Thank you very much. And if you have any questions, please visit our website, CCMF Vancouver, menandfamilies.org/Vancouver. And please, if you have any questions, you can send an email in. There's a link in the website. And our phone number. Oh, I thought I had it here. Justin, do you have it at your fingertips? I apologize.
Let's put the contact into the chat bar.
I'll do that.
Yeah, or thank you, Paul. Go for it.
Thank you.
Thanks, Paul. Appreciate you sharing that good news. There's going to be many more such exciting announcements out of the West Coast branch of CCMF. Okay, let's move on now to the main event. I'm going to introduce Jacky Zhou and ask him to prepare with his remarks on this really exciting topic. Jacky is a McGill Psychiatry Master's student with an enthusiasm for understanding and improving men's mental health. He works in collaboration with his supervisor, also a CAFE advisor. That's McGill Psychiatry Professor, Dr. Rob Whitley. Together, they've been studying the Seduction community. And Jacky's interest is focused on mobilizing knowledge and academic research in both China and Canada. Welcome to the CAFE webinar series, Jacky. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, Justin. Thank you. It's a great honor to be invited, and I haven't done these things in quite a while. So, and it's kind of a roughly put together presentation. So I'm just gonna apologize for in advance, and I apologize for the crazy hair. I've been in isolation for the past 20 days, so wasn't really grooming myself. And also, thank you, Paul. Great work that you guys been doing. And personally, I've always wanted to do some groundwork and actually get in touch with the people who actually work with men and work with them through their mental health issues. There's always been, I personally feel there's always been a gap between academic research and the social work and the psychiatry services that we actually provide. So I think to anyone listening today, if you're also a social worker or of a psychiatry background, hopefully we can talk about these more and more, and we can have more of these conferences and seminars. So the knowledge start moving, and we can really transfer what's on paper into the actual services we provide. So thank you, Paul, and thank you, Justin, for inviting me. Like Justin said, I used to be a student at McGill, and I worked with Dr. Whitley on the Seduction Community Project. And to anyone who's not familiar with what the Seduction Community is essentially a group that mainly focuses on teaching men, especially heterosexual men, how to achieve success with the opposite sex, how to secure a mate, and things of that sort. So they often refer to themselves as the pickup artists, so AKA the PUA masters. And so how we started this whole thing really was I want to start off by giving us a bigger overarching question that I want everyone to keep in mind as we go. So anyone who's been following the men's mental health situation are familiar with this question. It is why won't men, especially heterosexual men, utilize the current mental health services that we provide? Where we have a lot of services for them and free services, very, very thoughtful, very, very effective services, but then they're not utilized, and it is a well-known fact among scholars who research this topic that men underutilize mental health services compared to women. Heterosexual men compared to LGBT communities, they underutilize these services. So how can we get these heterosexual men to utilize the services that we do provide? And with that being, I think, one of the bigger questions that we have, that kind of just, that's what we started with, and that's kind of the goal that we had in the beginning. And that kind of eventually led our eyes to the Seduction community. So today, what we're going to do is, and so what we're going to do is I'm going to give you guys a brief introduction of this study, a summary of it. The name of the paper and the link to the paper will be provided for those who are interested to find out in more detail. And then we're going to talk about why these men choose pickup artists classes or seminars over the actual mental health services that we provide with professionals. And then we're going to take a look at what we can learn from these pickup artists and the people that offer lessons and treatments. And then eventually we're going to talk about the end goal is how we as mental health service providers, as psychiatrists, as social workers can better help to reach out to these men and better help them. So sorry. And here we go. So the Seduction community research, its name is as shown here, and basically what we did was we started off with an archival research. We kind of looked at online informations that are provided and a lot of the content and material that are created by more popular pickup artists, by more popular pickup instructors on their websites, on the YouTube channels. And then we started with the archival research and familiarize ourselves with the terms and things they use. And today we're kind of going to explore 3 questions. If we're thinking about men who are in need of mental health services, where can we find them? If I use the example of an ice cream truck, if you're an ice cream truck, where would you find your potential customers, right? We know that kids tend to buy ice creams, kids with adults, because just kids alone, they don't have the money. So, ideally places to be would be the park, basketball court, outside of a daycare during after school hours. So the same thing, when we're thinking about men in need of mental health service, where should we go? Statistically speaking, there are some really obvious indicators. We have substance abuse. Men who abuse substances are more likely to be in need of mental health services. Men with alcoholism, these are some obvious indicators. But then, it's kind of hard to reach out to these men if they don't come to us. We can't really, stand outside of the local dive bar or behind an alley of the drug seller, or, we can't actually post ads on Pornhub, which I actually might have a really high click and conversion rate, knowing that that's where a lot of the men go. And then of course porn addiction being another huge indicators. A lot of men actually struggle with porn addiction to some level. And then as Paul talked about previously, loss of employment, forced retirement, it has a lot to do with one's identity, one's sense of self-worth, of purpose. Men who experience that are usually in need of mental health services. And also, statistically, single men tend to have more mental health problems as compared to married men. So what I'm trying to say with all of these examples is that it's actually very hard to just pinpoint a very exact population of men that would require and would possibly be willing and looking for mental health service. So basically what we did was we just kept looking at these various statistic indicators, and eventually that led our eyes to a very small but fast growing community of men who are the seduction community. You know, they are a fast rising industry. It's $1 million industry, and you know, there's people teaching the art of seduction, how to pick up women, and there are companies whose sole business is basically teaching other men techniques to do so, and they make money off of it. And it's actually a global industry and is worth millions of dollars, and it's growing rapidly. So that seemed very interesting to us because, you know, as a basic economy goes with supply and demand. So if the market is growing so rapidly and there's so much need for it, this tremendous need, must like signal a lot of things. I mean, these men are dedicated. They're willing to dedicate tremendous amount of time, energy, resources, money, and sometimes like their whole being. They would quit their jobs. They would leave, you know, their family. They would quit their studies just to practice this seduction. So there's tremendous need and there's tremendous willingness to follow through. So that kind of gave us the idea that this community would be very interesting to look at. And so that's what we did with the seduction community study. What we did was we rephrased the question that we asked at the beginning. You know, why won't men utilize services, and how can we get them to? We rephrased that into this research. Basically, we're asking, why are men willing to join this bizarre community? You know, and what do they get out of it? So, you know, as I said, we started from archival research. We read up on the materials. We familiarized ourselves with the vocabulary, slang, the culture of the entire community. And then we joined the community both online and offline. We attended meetings. We went to the seminars offered. You know, we spoke to their instructors. We brought into their courses, and we got into their Facebooks, etc. And then we started, after we gained entry, we started with some semi-structured interviews, and the results and the people participated can be seen here. The people who actually did recorded interviews, there's 34 recorded interviews. And then you can take a look at the data that we came up with. We set the bar relatively low. You know, anyone who's engaged in the community online, you know, either through regular participation or frequent consumption of the YouTube channels or social media channels in the past 2 years, and you know, they're able to give informed consent and let us record the interviews, then that would be an okay criteria. So we interviewed 34 very committed members, and through the online postings, we handed out brochures, and later we got the samples through snowballing. And after that, just to verify the results we got, we did a lot of participant observation, which basically means I had to go undercover. I lived with some of the pickup artists. I went out to nightclubs and bars and watched them game, and you know, we worked out together. Basically, I shared my life with them, and they shared their lives with me. And I was able to, you know, go undercover and really take a look at how these guys function and how they live day to day. So this is a really cool part that if you guys are interested, we can get more into. There's a lot of details that are kind of amazing, and I'll share later on. So what we found was basically a very high portion of first and second generation immigrants, and that is something specific to Canada and Montreal. So, but also like many locals who's been here over two generations, they've expressed that they either moved around a lot as a kid, or they came here from other cities during childhood. So basically, you know, that says a lot about the current state of men. Maybe there's been a theory, there's been a hypothesis that leaving a familiar situation or living a familiar culture, it tends to de-skill the men who are in question, because you know, a lot of the people came from relatively traditional or conservative backgrounds, like Middle Eastern cultures, East Asian cultures, coming here in Canada, facing a whole different array of you know, interactions, social interactions, and a whole different gender script. You know, how to date, how to make friends, and things like that. It can be very intimidating, and they are often caught clueless and not knowing what to do. And that's very debilitating for these men. That was one of the series that we had, and it was kind of improved in the data here that a lot of the people who joined were first and second generation immigrants, or they have moved a lot during childhood and didn't really have a stable environment to kind of acquire social skills and be socialized into a lot of the things. And the data was actually, because 34 people, you can't really generalize too much out of it. So it's kind of a shame we didn't hand out more surveys. The conclusions we arrived at, why join? One of the biggest things, loneliness and exclusion, obviously. Loneliness was one of the most common answers, men during the transitional period of their lives, especially. So, leaving school, adjusting to a new city or country, etc., things like that. And some were motivated by the possibility to just have anyone to talk to. I had a guy, I was interviewing him, and he said, he cried when he first talked. He hadn't been able to talk to anyone, in half a year. And he literally cried when he just tried to step outside his home and talk to an old lady at a bus stop. And then the old lady, they had a little conversation, and it was the first time he actually initiated a conversation, and he cried when that happened. So, it just points to the extent of how much, pain and suffering that the person must have been through to not be able to initiate social contact, and having cried when an old lady talked to him. This is kind of one of the biggest things. There are no existing roles for these men during their transitional periods. There's no social network for them. And it's almost as if they fell out of society, and they were kind of left in a vacuum of relationship ties. They had no one they were close to. Sometimes many of the people that we interviewed during the time they joined the community, they were living alone. They basically felt excluded from whatever was happening. They were excluded from society, and they felt the need to just get back in it. And that was kind of one of the biggest reasons that they joined the community, actually. Not because they wanted to, have success with women per se, but mainly a lot of them, the reason they joined was because they were just feeling so lonely and excluded that they needed a way to get out of it. Another key finding was the reason that men joined this community was they were seeking male guidances. They needed a role model to teach them how to be a man, essentially. There's two reasons for this. One, if we look at the statistics with the divorce rates, and there's been a study that in Canada, around 80% of the custody cases that were fought in court, 80% of them, the custody is rewarded to the mother over the father. So a lot of these people are raised by a single mother, and they had a distant father, or they had a lack of the father figure, or their fathers were from very conservative cultures and backgrounds, that they didn't really have a working template of intimacy or how male should behave in certain situations. So that was one of the reasons. And the other reason was that hegemonic masculinity comes into play here. For those of you not familiar with the term, hegemonic masculinity basically means that there's a dominant prototype men who are kind of oppressive, or they're on a higher social hierarchy than women or other types of men. So like LGBT men, or like the men that we're talking about right now, they feel very emasculated. And but then instead of being, there's no realization, like the LGBT community or like women, like the social discourse would constantly remind them that they are not the one to be blamed for this. They are the victims of this hierarchy. They're being oppressed by this higher masculinity. So, but then these men, not falling into these categories, they are kind of feeling that they don't have the realization that they're victims here. They feel guilty. They feel, they are inadequate. They feel that they are ashamed. They don't measure up to the ideals of what a real man is like. And they're very keen to be shown how to be a man. And this is where it gets interesting, because this feeling of inadequacy, this feeling of wanting to be a man, wanting to measure up to the traditional masculine ideals, it kind of creates a split between. Then there's two groups of pickup artists. There's one group who's actually very, very protective of the traditional masculine ideals. They resent society for putting it down. They resent the modern feminist movement. They're really protective of the alpha ideals. They're really protective of climbing the social hierarchy to reach that standard that men are born to conquer and defend, to provide, to rule, and things like that. And then there's another group of men, and these men actually they're trying to basically redefine masculinity, and which is actually what we're trying to do today. So I want to share a story which really stuck with me, an experience that I had while undercover in the Seduction community. I call it the Fight Club story because what this thing is still here. Basically, what I did when I was undercover was I lived with some of the more famous or people with more street cred in the pickup community. I lived in a house with 4 of them, and occasionally they would host events for any man in the community to join. So one day I got this invited into this Facebook group, and it's called Fight Club. And basically, what they're setting out to do is telling everyone to just bring a set of boxing gloves and a mouse guard. Let's go to a local park and we'll just spar. And off the top of my head, that just sounds like a really scary thing to do, right? Like there's no protective gears or anything. I don't know most of the people who are attending, and they were talking about street fighting techniques, and there was no waivers, there was no professionals spotting you. You don't know what you're getting into. But then for science, I did it anyway. I had a little bit of background in kickboxing, so I went to the event. And what ended up happening was actually one of the most beautiful moments I've ever had in the community. What happened was there was actually just the right amount of competitiveness, and it was a great safe space, because everyone was just really encouraging, and everyone was really kind to each other. There was a lot of teaching and a lot of sharing took place, and it went beyond boxing. It went way beyond boxing. There were people who were scared, and it was okay to admit that you were scared, and people would just guide you into it. There was a bully who brought MMA gloves and was really rude and kind of bullied people. And the way that the community dealt with it was also really amazing. Everyone just kind of stopped and was like, dude, just stop. We're just here to have fun. Just stop. And that's all it took. And the guy stopped, he apologized, and then became a part of the group, and that was it. And what was really amazing was the extent of sharing that happened that afternoon. Guys were sharing basically, they were sharing their thoughts on sexuality. They were sharing their thoughts. They were sharing their childhood stories. They were sharing their childhood pains. People were connecting at such a level. People were talking about how their fathers was absent, how they've been hurt by the first love, and you wouldn't. I've never seen men even in a mental health setting talk about these things, and you don't really even. It's rare to see that level of sharing in a safe space like this. And that day was just really an eye opener for me. And most of these guys are strangers. I mean, this is the first time they've ever been together, and this just made me believe that there was a possibility that we could just redefine what masculinity can be. Because that day, basically, at the end of the discussion, what we did was we redefined what masculinity can be. We're just lying in the park, and we're sweating, and we're passing around granola bars, and we just basically deconstructed the traditional alpha scheme. How we think the alpha scheme came to be, why their fathers and other men fall for it, and we just reconstructed it. We're saying we're sharing, and we're saying men can be sentimental, can be sensitive. It's okay to hurt. It's okay to be not self-reliant. And it really just gave me a lot of hope. This Fight Club experience in the community, it really gave me a lot of hope, because there's this second group of men. The second group of men who's not buying into the traditional alpha schemes. They're really actively trying to redefine what masculinity can be, and really trying to to create a safe environment to share. And I think this has been one of the most amazing experiences I've had being undercover in the community, and it was very positive. Beside that story, the third reason that men join this community is personal development and skill acquisition. So one key hypothesis that Rob and I had, like I said before, is that the current fast-changing social environments and constantly switching places during childhood, it tend to de-skill men. And due to the expectation for them to be self-reliant and not show emotions, be stoic, they are especially affected by the loss of these social and interpersonal skills. And these skills are not usually picked up by the educational system. So a number of these men, they ended up taking jobs in areas of sales, being a promoter or customer service jobs, and they've achieved great success after joining the community. And a lot of people say that this is the greatest takeaway of joining the community, is really sharpening their social skills and building their social networks. So like said above, the impacts are pretty straightforward. There are social skills advances, they build a social support network, but there are obviously dark sides to it. Some of the most obvious ones that we encountered, a lot of men suffer intimacy problems after joining the community and really devotedly consume their material. They kind of gain this, because the community really focuses on how to get a girl, but it doesn't really teach them on how to maintain a real intimate relationship. So a lot of men, they would express that at the end of it, they got really good at it, and they would have girls on rotation. They would have abundance of sexual partners, but then they feel more lonely and desolate. And another thing is that there could be a learned distrust or sometimes a disdain for women, because a certain kind of, if you're just going to nightclubs and bars and picking up on women on the street all day, you will encounter and you will have success with a certain kind of women. And then it becomes like a self-conforming bias, right? If they only have success with women, and then they're like this, then they regard all women to be like that. We had cases where a guy who he often have successful encounters with women with a boyfriend and husband, and then once they enter intimate relation themselves, it's really hard for them to trust their partner. They will have trust issues because they've had so much experience with cheating before. And then the men who were successful with women who like to use men for resources, then it kind of just leads them to believe that all women are gold diggers and manipulative, etc. And that's one of the really big problems of the community. The other part is addictiveness. This do tend to become all-consuming if you really dive into it. A lot of men, they find themselves unable to settle down with one partner, unable to stop themselves from seeing every female in their lives as a conquest. And then they're constantly seeking out affairs, constantly seeking out women as a sport and a habit, and to some point they kind of feel like they don't really want it, they don't really need it, but then they just couldn't help themselves. And obviously, the objectification of women is one of the biggest problems with this community. Is some of the men who are in the community eventually gain this perspective where they treat women like trophies. They treat them as playthings. They disregard their feelings, which is absolutely horrible. These are the very, very negative effects that some of the men pick up in the community. So why do they choose the pickup community over mental health services? Because, like Justin and Paul said, we do have a lot of amazing men's mental health services. We do have help out there. A pretty obvious reason, stigma related. There's a lot of stigma around men's mental health, around mental health in general. To go get help, it means that you're admitting defeat. It means you're admitting that you're sick. There's something wrong with you. There's something fundamentally flawed about you. So that stigma is a big problem. And also toxic masculinity, like the feeling that, you have to be stoic, you have to be self-reliant, you can't admit defeat, it's shameful to get help. It's shameful to share feelings, emotions, and things like that. And of course, accessibility being another thing. A lot of the men that we interviewed, I've actually asked some of them outside the interview, you know, why haven't you thought of getting a, you know, a psychiatrist or getting, you know, mental health services providers to help you out? And then one of the most common answers that I get is that they feel like it's more of a general suffering instead of a specific diagnosis. So they really don't, they can't really pinpoint an exact thing that they're not happy with in their life, or they can't really pinpoint an exact thing that they can fix or they want to fix. You know, they just feel this general suffering that's happening. They, like, a lot of the answers I get, they would say, you know, if I was to go to the doctor, or if I was to actually go to one of these, you know, help groups, I don't know what to say. I wouldn't know, you know, I don't think there's anything wrong with me. I wouldn't know what to say, but I'm just having this general suffering. And then another thing is the dreaded, they kind of, they're afraid of conventional talk-based interventions. We have encountered with men who've actually been through the mental health system. They've actually tried to get help, or, you know, they had counseling, or they had a psychiatrist or a therapist for a while. And for those who had the experiences, the way they talk about it is usually very negative. You know, they felt uncomfortable, they felt vulnerable, and they sometimes felt they were under scrutiny, and you know, they have a distrust for the system. And then, of course, one of the biggest things I think is really marketing. You know, just is so much easier to attract attention and really to have guys come and buy your material if you would title it "How to Get in Bed with Any Hot Chick in 10 Days" versus, you know, come and talk about your childhood problems. You know, come and sit down and let's deconstruct your life and talk about your intimacy issues. The former is obviously more appealing. And sorry about that. One of the other things that was really prevalent was because the whole, if we go back to the root of it, how pickup all started, it kind of generated out of a self-help ideology. So, you know, the idea that the only person who can help oneself is oneself. And that really ties in with the toxic masculinity and the ideas of being self-reliant. And of course, how the community operates, it has a lot of role models like KOLs, influencers. These people, they're making a profit out of it. So they are really working very hard to market themselves. They're trying to appeal to these men. And these men who are looking for a role model, they're looking for guidance on how to be a man, and they're looking for basically someone they can trust and look up to. These men, once they find someone that tries to appeal to them, it's very easy to get drawn into it. And then another thing, which is great, that you know, we're having this thing streaming on YouTube, is they have a huge, these seduction community companies, they have a huge media presence and outreach. You know, they have YouTube channels with thousands and tens of thousands of followers. They actually pay money for ads, you know, at the start of the videos you see, and they have ads everywhere. And you know, they have a huge online presence and outreach. So it is very easy for people who are in need to come across their materials. It's very easy for them to look at it and be drawn to it. So I think these are really the reasons why men would choose to, you know, study pickup from a creepy guy on YouTube as versus to mental health services and a professional service provider. So what we can learn from it, I think one of the key things that we can learn is actually the game structure. You know, if I break it down into more professional terms, I think it really, essentially what it is it really instills growth mindset, and it teaches goal setting, and it gives a lot of motivation. For those of you not familiar with how the pickup community works, they like to call it the game. You know, to go out and game. To go out and pick up women is kind of like a game for them, and not in a very literal sense. You know, they have gaming vocabularies for it. You know, you can go into beast mode, god mode. You approach a set. There's a 3-second rules. You should run a certain opener, or, you know, there's a canned phrases, and they really break it down into a lot of gaming terms that they're familiar with. I think that does a lot of things. First of all, it kind of gives them the courage to start, because once they give themselves pseudonyms, a lot of them use fake names when they game. That is their game name. So by doing that, they kind of just distance their own ego from the possibility of getting rejected and the fears they have going into it. It kind of gives them the idea that, oh, this is just a game. It's okay to fail, and it is okay. It's not going to hurt as bad when I get rejected, and it's always that I have the ability to change, and it's okay to fail. And once they have that motivation getting into it, then decoding the really complex social interactions into deconstructing it into really gaming-like terms, they're kind of taking their grip on reality in this way. They're learning to deal with it via breaking these really complex things down. Eye contact and hand gestures, body language, all of these unspoken signals that if you're not socialized into, is actually really hard to pick up, and it's really hard to teach in a lot of ways. But then by breaking it down, for example, the 3-second rule is like, if you had eye contact with a girl for more than 3 seconds and you didn't break eye contact, then that means she likes you. Go and talk to her. So these really direct and kind of seems like obvious or almost stupid way of breaking down social interaction really works with the men who's not been socialized into it. It kind of gives them a grip on reality. It gives them the feeling that they're in control and they can actually learn this. Things like body language. Are you leaning into them? Are their feet pointing away from you? Things like that. They really change the whole real life situation of starting a social interaction into a game. And by doing so, they give themselves the ability to control that situation and scenario. And that gives them the courage to approach, and that gives them, safety net if they fail. And then that really gives them the motivation and makes it, controllable. It becomes a really, really contained system where, it's a really smart system to, they have immediate feedback, so they can do deliberate practices with it, and then they have reward upon completion, and obviously there's a punishment upon failure. And it gives monitoring, because you usually have your peers, everyone game together, you have your peers supporting you, you have your instructor behind you, and then there's a place to showcase your improvement. Even they have different terms that they can unlock. They can unlock different achievements, and they can boast about it in the community. So that really brings a lot of people who are otherwise just trapped in their homes, that they're falling outside of the of society. They don't have any social interactions, don't have any social ties or roles. It really brings them back into reality, because for a lot of them, in the internet, the virtual reality is something that they're more comfortable with. They've kind of grew up playing video games, and they're comfortable with the settings and the environments in the games. Basically, what Pickup did was it kind of moved that gaming structure into real life, and in it kind of instills growth mindset. It teaches them to set goals, and it gives them a lot of motivation to do it. So I think if we can have similar structured programs, then the way that we teach social interaction, this very much, personally, I think it's very much like CBT. You kind of start off with, you have an instructor kind of pushing them to do social interactions. If you're afraid of it, you start off with like an old lady at the bus stop. If you succeed, you go to a waitress at McDonald's, and then eventually you move your way up until you're comfortable with complex social interactions. I think if we can maybe incorporate some of the ways that, they use the gaming structure, maybe we can structure a lot of our rehabilitation programs for men with social anxiety, and a lot of other, mental health issues. If we can really try to equip them with skills in a way that they're comfortable with, especially for the next generation of men who will be growing up, perhaps more comfortable with this way of teaching, with this kind of vocabularies, with this way of structuring the world in their head. This is something that we can really, this structure is something that we can borrow and put into practice. Another thing that I find really great is the community structure. They have a very huge online community, and people usually get together on Facebook or on Twitter, and they form their own little offline communities where everyone would go out to game together. They would form things like the Fight Club that I talked about. Guys would go to the bars, or they would go, basically teach each other boxing or go work out together. And this community structure really helps as well. It gives the men a sense that they're not the only ones suffering with this problem. And like I said before, a lot of these men, they fall out. They feel like they're excluded from society because they don't have a solid identity. They don't have a role. They don't have a, you only see yourself when, like, more clearly when you're in relation to others. You know your place in society. You know where you are in terms of a group, and it's very important to have that. I think the community gives the guys something like that, and the community is actually quite welcoming, and I personally, at least I find through my experiences, a welcoming and relatively open and safe community to talk about things. Men can talk about their frustrations, they can share their problems, and the more senior members of the group usually take it upon themselves to give answers, to reply to these messages and try to take them out to game or to have certain activities. It really gives them a sense of self-identity. I belong, I can identify with them. I'm not the only one suffering from these problems, and then it kind of gives them a sense of responsibility. Even after they practice for a while, they take it upon themselves to help the new guys in the group. That's a really, really healthy way to incorporate people into the community and keep the community running. And also it gives men a lot of social support, which is, a lot of research has found for almost any mental illness, social support is always a helpful mediator. So that is a huge thing. I think the community structure, online community paired with like smaller offline groups, is absolutely very helpful in these cases. And then another thing that I found we can borrow, maybe the health services that we give right now, we can borrow from them, is the existence of key opinion leaders. Basically role models, they can look up to, and they can, ask questions to when they feel they can trust. Is someone that they can look up to, someone they like to become, and someone who can help me clear my path and really shape out my goals and tell me how to get there. This really, really helps to a lot of men because, like I said, a big reason that a lot of the men join the group is because they're really looking for a male role model that they can model themselves after. And then a lot of the guys in the group, they will have different instructors they look up to. They will have, different leaders they respect. And of course, the dark side of the pickup community is that there are a lot of like cult-like leaders who have massive support, and like people buy into whatever they say. That's not healthy. But having these key opinion leaders is really helpful in building the community and really holding the community together. So how can we better help these men in question? I think first things is stronger media presence. Like having this YouTube channel, what Justin is doing, and is absolutely amazing. A lot of the academic professors have done an amazing job with that. Professor out of University of Toronto, Jordan Peterson, I'm sure some of you would be familiar with him. He has a huge media presence. He's regarded by a lot of men, and especially a lot of men in the pickup community actually identify with him as their opinion leaders. They buy into his content. They look at his teachings about self-help, about mental health, about intimacy. And Dr. Phillips and Bardo as well. And of course, what Dr. Whitley, what these people have been trying to do is amazing. Having that online presence, having that media presence is important in today's society. If you want to reach out to men, if you want them to come and get the materials that they need. The accessibility of self-help resources is really, really important too. Dr. Peterson has this self-authoring program. Dr. Phillips and Bardo has this heroic imagination program, and there's multiple porn addiction programs. They have more dynamic interactions with the content, and you can do data collection with it. Dr. Bilsker, which is a professor that I've been working a little bit with out of UBC, he has a self-help manual on the website. So these self-help resources are really a good starting place to offer to these men, because be it that they have this natural distrust in the mental health services that we provide, or be it that they have this self-reliance masculine ideas, having these self-help resources available to them is really a good starting point, because first of all, that already helps them in a way, and also that really tend to lead to more interactions, more possibilities. For example, what these because I work in media right now, so what a lot of the things that we do, or media companies do, is that they would have a person in the front trying to grab attention, and then they would offer free content. That way you can really sorry, message coming. So that way you can really really incorporate these men. They start being passive content viewers, right? You have contents ready, they're passive content viewers, and then eventually, once they feel that this content is helping them, they will move on to consume more of your material. They will follow you on media, and they will consume more of your material. And eventually, if you have a community ready, they will join the community. And then eventually, if you have offline seminars, you have offline events, or if you want to get in touch with them, they will be very willing to be helped, because there's this trust established out of the time they spend viewing your material. And that way we can attract a lot more men to join us at our seminars, and to utilize the mental health services that we do provide. From passive consumers to active members of the community, and eventually we can build an actual community out of these guys, and they will be able to help each other. So what the huge company in Pickup, they have a company called Real Social Dynamics, RSD. They have a really, really fascinating structure. They have their headquarters, they have inner circles online, and then they have inner circles at different cities being held by different, pickup instructors. And then they would have offline layers, consisted of instructors, enthusiasts, and run by the community leaders. And then they have these little branches that really just infiltrate through community, and they have this really amazing dynamic where the headquarters could issue a message, and it would just kind of drop down to each level, and men really, they would start off passively viewing and consuming the materials that the company provides, and eventually that they're really good at addressing these men and kind of foster these men into paying customers. That method is really something that I think as mental health service providers we kind of lack. That kind of experience working with the media, that kind of experience, how to guide people step by step and lure them in, per se, from passive consumers into an active member of the community. I think that kind of concludes what I wanted to share today. Mainly, I wanted to talk about how we can translate some of the things that we saw in the community into mental health services, and how we can better shape the services to attract and better help the men that are in need. So yeah, I'll be open to taking any questions.
Okay, thanks so much, Jacky. That was insightful and inspiring. Really appreciate you sharing those really fascinating insights. We're going to take questions now, and I think I did see a couple of chat messages come in from Paul Dowell. Paul, did you actually want to come back on video and audio and ask your question to Jacky? I will enable that. Give me just a second. Okay, we're bringing Paul back on. Go ahead with your question, Paul.
Hi, thanks again for that, Jacky. That was very interesting. Your discussion about the Fight Club I found intriguing. I'm part of a men's team, and what you described there, the open sharing and discussion, is something that we embrace. And that came about through an agreement of confidentiality and getting to know each other. How do you think that safe environment where these young men could share freely was conjured up within this fight club?
Well, I think first of all, there's been this theory that men tend to communicate better in a structured setting. So just sitting down and just talking tend to be stressful for men. Perhaps women do it a lot, but men are usually they bound over in a structured activity. They could be watching sports, or they could be playing sports, or they could be fishing. Like there has to be a structured activity present for them to actually talk about something. They can't. If they just sit down and talk about it, they would feel very threatened. So I think, first of all, the existence of a structured activity, be it sports, be it fishing, be it something else, a structured activity, the presence of that would help men to open up and kind of bond and build this basic trust between each other to be able to share these things. And then a second thing I think is really helpful to have someone who's experienced, for the pickup people is their pickup instructors. For us it would be basically like a help group. There's a facilitator. There's someone who kind of guides the topic very very smoothly into different topics. Parent issues, perhaps. First love, relationship experiences, sexuality. Someone guiding these topics in among the discussions that they have. And then I think also, establishing trust in a very, how do I say this? I think the existence of that bully actually pulled everyone closer together. Like there was one guy who was just really macho, and he brought like really thin MMA gloves, and he was bullying everyone. And how that was dealt with was actually also very amazing. How everyone kind of just stood up for themselves, and everyone just stopped what they were doing and uniformly said, "Dude, just stop that. It's not okay here." And and you're welcome to stay, but just stop that. And the guy apologized immediately, and he became part of the group. I think that also has a kind of a strange unifying quality to it. So yeah, so I think that day really, it opened a lot of thoughts for me, and that stuck with me for a long time. I think, that really speaks to how, if we can structure something similarly, in our mental health services, that would really be a very great safe space.
That's really helpful, because one of the things that I've mentioned in our meetings, and Justin, you may recall this, is in our facility in Vancouver, I wanted to have a space where men could come together and do activities together, such as maybe repairing a car or doing some woodworking or things like that, where they can do an activity together and learn together and bond in that way. And what you're telling me is that is a good direction.
I believe so. And also there's been from educational and childhood psychology, there's been a developmental stage where rough and tumble play is actually really important. So boxing, a contact sport, might have something to do with that as well. Like psychologically, you kind of learn your boundaries in social interaction. You learn your boundaries with people through rough and tumble play. You learn how much force you use, how to control your force, how to communicate with the other person, how to exchange blows, and I think this kind of contact sport might also have something to do with it, where you build enough trust and comfort with the other person, actually, knowing how much force to give and having enough trust to step in the ring with them. That might have something to do with that as well.
That's very helpful, Jacky. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Paul. Okay, we have a question from Julian. Julian has asked it over chat. I've asked him if he would like to join us as a panelist, and I'm trying to make that happen. Julian, are you able to turn on a web? There we go. Okay. And if you can just unmute yourself, go ahead and ask your question.
So hi, Jacky, how are you?
Hi, Julian. Good.
So basically, I am an immigrant in Toronto, right? And my question is, if we as males can, or how do we males integrate ourselves in a city where different cultures, So basically my question is how an immigrant like myself or others will feel somehow loneliness in these kind of areas where where you're an immigrant and you're basically alone, and how it differentiates if you are a male as well.
I think me being an immigrant as well, I'm a second generation immigrant, but yeah, I understand a lot of things that you're saying, because a lot of the social scripts, a lot of the things that is different culture wise, what might be appropriate or inappropriate in our culture might not be appropriate here. So, and it's also hard to have, opportunities to kind of merge in and be assimilated into the local culture. So I think one of the big things I do, for example, is I'm a huge basketball fan, and whichever city I go to, I grew up in Vancouver, I moved to Montreal for college. The first thing I do when I go to a city is always go to a street basketball court close to my house. And basically after a few pickup games, you'll be able to meet guys and, form a relationship and a basic level of trust. And then, inviting them to your house and going to their house and eventually forming a little social networks out of, for me, it is basketball. So I think, for you, it might be music. I'm a jazz musician too. So I play jazz with my friends. So a lot of things is, like I said, men, we are more comfortable bonding over something structured, so, perhaps finding a breaking point, find this gaining entry, find something that can help you gain entry into something, be it basketball, be it jazz, be it, perhaps you're at a school, you can always find something that can help you gain entry. And I understand it might be hard for some guys, if their passion is gaming, something you do from home, right? If your passion is more something like, you might not be into sports, you might not be into group sports or music, it's hard for you to find that thing to help you gain entry. So I think what Pickup did, it generated this thing that can help people break the boundaries and kind of, give them the entry point. So I think, in terms of just man to man, I'm sure there's things that you're passionate about. And if that thing can become your entry point, do it. If you're a music fan, go to like music festivals or find people you can jam music with. If you're a sports fan, find people who you can play sports with, and then go to the local gyms, go to the local bars, or music concerts. You'll find people who you share similar passions to, and that will be your entry point. I don't know if that was helpful, but that was kind of my take on it.
Perfect. Good.
Thank you. Justin, you're on mute.
Sorry, I have to remember to unmute myself just as I ask others to do that. Heather has a question. She's asked, I think that I just read it out, Heather, so that's not a problem. I will do that. She asks, how do you separate out the idea that many of your participants were, quote, foreign born, so might have joined this type of group to learn cues on how to interact with women, rather than being fragile mentally or in need of mental health counseling?
Well, first of all, those two things are not like mutually exclusive. Like the person can be both. He could be from a mental, and those things have a causation between them too. If you're from a foreign country and when you're in a transitional period, we put you in an environment that's totally foreign and sometimes hostile, that would result in mental health problems. And then, first of all, that's that. And second of all, there has been a few cases where, there are people who are just, locals, and they kind of just suffered from this loneliness or feeling of exclusion, or having a bit of a social ability issues, or having mental health issues too. That's obviously, through the interview, it would kind of just bring itself out. We'll be asking them questions on why they joined, how their families were, who they're close to, and it would be relatively easy to tell during the interview.
Okay. Heather, I've given you speaking privileges, so if you did have any follow-up to that, please go for it.
Okay, can you hear me? Yeah.
Yes, hi, Heather.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Yeah, it's because I'm a sociologist, really. So of course I'm looking more at the interaction that would take place. So that's why I was thinking about this question, you know, the fact that men might come here and fine, you know, they might be alone, temporarily they might feel lonely, you know, which I came here as an immigrant also, so I had the same feeling, you know, many years ago. But I didn't really see it at the time as, you know, myself being depressed or in need of, you know, some kind of counseling or mental support, basically. So I was, you know, I'm just really interested in that. I mean, obviously, immigrant men would find that very interesting if they came from another culture, which didn't really have the same cues that we have here in North America, let's say, of, you know, dating and interaction with women. So this kind of group would be, and mentoring with other men would be really useful for them. But, you know, I am having trouble, I must say. I mean, of course, I'm going to see how it can help them mentally, for sure it will, you know, in the long term. But I'm just wondering how you specifically in your study made the leap, as I say, it's a leap from, you know, interviewing these men to then thinking that they are in need of this support. Do you understand my question?
I think I do. If I rephrase it correctly, you're wondering that there's this logical gap between saying that these men are in need of, you know, especially immigrant men, they're in need of getting themselves familiarized with the local gender scripts and dating scripts.
Right. Yes,
and
exactly.
saying that they actually have mental health issues.
Right.
Yeah.
So, you know, I'm interested in how you make the connection, how you personally in this study made the connection or made the leap, if we like, you know, between the two ideas.
Sure. Well, first of all, I kind of summarized the whole thing. If you go back to the interview transcripts, and if we go back to the things that I've seen and heard in the community,
Right.
they bring it up themselves. You know, they just say that, you know, they just kind of bring it up, you know, like, oh, okay, I was feeling, you know, depressed, and like at one point, you know, I cried talking to the lady when I was able to talk to a lady at the bus stop. I cried for hours. You know, they kind of just kind of brings itself out. So that was kind of the way that we made the connection that, you know, some of the men, you know, there might be a causal relation here, and maybe by fixing this, we can address the mental health issues too.
Okay, so you basically, I'm sorry if I take up your time. So you basically made what on interviewing these people, that's when you made the connection.
Yes.
In a sense, yeah, because I have got your article. I found it really interesting. I teach gender in Montreal at Concordia, so you know, I am very interested in this topic, and so I'm going to read your article. You know, obviously get more detail about it, but thank you very much. It's very interesting.
Thank you. Thank you
so much, Heather. Great questions. Okay, so we've got another question coming up from Sivam. I think Sivam has asked to come on video to ask his question. So let's see if we can do that. Okay, Sivam, we seem to have you joined as a panelist. You should be able to enable both audio and video to ask your question.
Hello, Jacky.
Hi, nice green screen.
Nice to meet you. Thank you, actually, Justin. I have a few questions. Myself, I'm South Asian. What age group you're talking about? Because this is very interesting, very eye-opener too. Myself, I am part of International Men's Day. I am also the founder of Voice of Men 360. I am doing live shows and then bringing people to talk about their life stories and sharing a life journey. But my question is, what age group we are talking about the research you did it?
I'm sorry?
What age group?
What age group? So
yeah.
If we, I can pull it back. I kind of skipped over that. I apologize for that. So if we take a look at the data, you know, the median age is 25.2. We had, the oldest guy we had was a 37-year-old. And then there was a few older guys in the group. Usually older guys in this age group, they join the group after a divorce or separation. We had the oldest guy I remember seeing in the group, like having a brief conversation with, he was 52, I think. And then younger guys usually goes from anywhere from 15, 16, high school age, all the way up to 52. But then most of the guys that we do interview are my age, just finishing college, just joining the workforce around 20 to 25, 26, I'd say.
So how about in terms of the married or family men? Had you had a chance to talk to them and then see their problems, or?
Well, because the nature of the community, it really just attracts single men more than married men, or a man with a steady spouse. But yeah, of course, I'm sure as married men, they have a bulk of their problems, including, like Justin said, abuse and things like that. But then it's not really the focus of the study. And then, because of the nature of the community, is more, it attracts single men.
Oh, okay. So the other question is like, what's the solution or any suggestion? You talk about the general suffering. What do you think? What would you have in your mind, or,
I think when people talk about, unable to put a specific diagnosis on their suffering, it is a very common thing. Most people without professional trainings would not be able to do this, just feel I'm depressed, I'm unhappy, so many things wrong with my life. I'm not getting employed. Some of those things are not their fault. Some of those things are, the way the society functions, and, maybe not being able to get employed, or not being able to finish school, or studying something they don't like, or having a bad relationship with their family. These are things that are not necessarily their responsibility, but they are suffering from it. So the skills, but then a lot of skills that we teach can be transferable in fixing a lot of things. For example, the ability to initiate and maintain social support and having social interaction skills, that's a huge thing. If you have that, then maybe that will solve maybe 60% of your problems. Once you have friends, once you're able to make friends, once you feel liked, once you're a part of a group, you will have a more solid self-identity, more self-esteem, more self-worth, and that can translate sometimes into employment. Like I said, a lot of the men who are not able to find jobs, after joining the community, they ended up landing jobs, as promoters or as salesmen or as customer service people, because they've been able to sharpen their social skills, and that translates to employment. And also the same thing translates to intimacy as well. If they're accepted by the opposite sex, if they're able to feel liked, and that really helps with their self-esteem and self-worth. So a lot of the things, and things like goal setting, things like growth mindset, these are psychological concepts that has been researched, has been academically proven that once it's instilled, it will help the person in general and in their mental health states. So I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, one more question. I come across, or I heard in our community too, that the age group you targeted, it's had a couple of suicide cases too. What would your like research found, or like what anything particularly you come across? What are the major challenges? I don't know whether it is related to academic level or any other pressure, social pressure. What did you find? Anything particularly in terms of when it comes to suicide?
Well, suicide is a huge other complex issue. I'm currently working on teen suicide in China. I'm doing research on that at the moment. So there's a variety of huge, very complex issues. But then we didn't really tackle that issue in the research that we're doing here, because it's more intimacy related. But then, statistically, single men tend to commit suicide a lot more than married men. Like, that's just statistics. So it definitely has something to do with having social support. And that definitely has something to do with having, satisfying relationships. So I think that would be all the answer I can give to you in terms of suicide at this age group from my research.
All right. So just do a quick one more favor. So if you want to
the last question, just because there may be others that are trying to get
in. Just how can I get in touch with you or get more details about this?
Well, I'm sure Justin can put up my email, or maybe is there a way to post up my email on the?
You should have access to the chat. It's at the bottom of your your window, Jacky?
Let me just.
Thank you both.
Oh, thanks, Stefan. Great questions.
Thank you.
In the Q&A.
We are actually running a bit low on time, but if there's one or maybe at most two more questions,
Of course.
please put your hand up if you do have a question to ask. Well, if there aren't any, maybe I'll pose the last one, and that is, you mentioned being involved with the media and also working with the entertainment industry, Jacky. And I'm curious if in that space there's sometimes the possibility of the media almost reinforcing gender stereotypes, and we have our issues with the media's portrayal of men and masculinity. But I'm wondering, are there any signs of optimism that we could take advantage of with the media or the entertainment industry? Are there kind of pockets of more sort of progressive, approaches to dealing with gender issues and especially gender health issues that we should be aware of, that you're involved with, that you can sort of tune us into?
Well, obviously, that's a very great question. Obviously, I work in the Chinese media industry, which is a lot more, if I may use the term, backward compared to Canadian, media industry in terms of gender issues, in terms of, gender dynamics. But because it is normal, because media, they want to grab the eye, right? So they kind of gravitate not toward what's accurate or what's best for society, but towards what catches the most attention. So that tends to create a lot of problems. I actually talked about this research on a Chinese reality show that I was actually asked to attend, but then they edited the content terribly, and it just ended up, they kind of just scrutinized the community and scrutinized me in the process. So it's very hard actually to have a solid foundation in the media industry and expect them to by themselves do good work. So currently what I'm doing is, because in this day and age, social media is very, very predominant, and also anyone can start their own YouTube channels, anyone can start their own Twitter feed, anyone can start their own brand basically in the media industry. So what I'm doing at the moment is I'm working on scripts for a movie that is related to depression. I'm trying to push Dr. Bilsker's self-help manual in China. A couple of weeks ago, he messaged me. The manual already had 300,000 downloads, which is amazing. So just having a media presence and just having control over your content would be the first step. And then the second step would obviously be, how do we get the publicity? How do we get the people to come take a look at it? And my solution towards it is basically, I do acting as well. I write songs and produce songs as well. So basically, I'm trying to do other things that would grab people's attention, and then that will lead them to my social media page. That will lead them to my channel, where the hope is in the future I'll be able to produce. I'll be able to give out solid contents that will be helpful towards people, and hopefully shape the trend. And also, once you're in the industry, you will have influential friends. You will have famous friends, famous singers, famous actors, and these people, they can share your content on their personal social media page, and that has been proven to be very helpful. When I was pushing the self-help manual of Dr. Bilsker, I had a very famous singer friend who helped me share with it, and the next day the download goes up by tens of thousands. So I think hopefully in the next few years, I will be able to gain more popularity, and I'll be able to, continue my research and continue, producing contents that are, helpful, and, hopefully start a trend. And like I said, I really hope that we can communicate, we can kind of create this community of men, in the same way that the Seduction community is formed. We can have our own KOLs, we have our own self-help contents, and we have our own community where people can share. And that would be amazing, and that's kind of the end goal that I'm pushing for. And I think hopefully it comes true one day, and I think it will.
Well, that's really wonderful, Jacky, and I think we have a really strong champion in you as an ambassador for the men's health cause, both as a scholar and then through your your profile in the industry. So I appreciate that you're using that access to bring awareness to these important issues. Thank you for bringing awareness to our community today. This was a real pleasure to have you present. I'm afraid we have run out of time for questions. I do see there's a bit of chat happening. If you've got questions for Jacky, I think he has posted his contact information, so he's open to you reaching out to him that way. You can also reach out through me if you've got any questions about Center for Men and Families or CAFE. I'd be your point of contact on that. But really want to thank you again, Jacky, for joining us today. Thanks also, Paul, for coming on and sharing some updates on what's happening at one of our upcoming emerging centers. That's everything for tonight, everybody. We're going to continue our webinar series now that we're heading back into to the fall. We anticipate having a webinar at least once a month, maybe more often when we can manage it. So if you're registered for emails, you'll be getting notices. If not, you can contact me, get on the email list. But I really appreciate everybody's attention tonight. Thanks again to Jacky in particular. And we'll be in touch with all of you about the details of our upcoming events. For now, I'm going to wish all of you a very nice evening. Take care. Bye now.
Thank you, Justin. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye now.